are listening to the Solar Panel, the Phoenix Suns Show.
Good morning, folks. Thank you for joining us on a Saturday morning edition of the Suns Solar Panel. Our panel today has a special guest, as he just tweeted out for the masses, for everybody who follows him. We get a whole hour to give him crap for his take on one Devin Booker the other night. But we'll also talk about other things besides that one take. Richard has been a closet Suns fan for years. In fact, let's see your shirt there a little bit closer. There you go. See, he's even got the Phoenix
center
Sun.
who killed the Mavs in the first two games.
In the first two, exactly. Richard Stamen, thank you for joining us today.
Hey, thank you guys for having me. It's always fun. I know Brandon and I, during the very beginning of the pandemic, we did some podcasts about the draft, but touched on the Suns, but it's nice to fully do a Suns podcast. Thank you guys for having me.
Oh, absolutely. And my regular partner, Brandon, Zona, how's it going, man?
Pretty good. Trying my best not to let this Game 7 on Sunday affect my entire weekend, but yeah, other than that,
it's impossible to have it not affect your entire weekend.
Yeah. But yeah, other than that, doing great. Good to have MavsDraft, aka Suns Draft, on. Like you said, we've done pods in the past, but it's been overdue to have him on the show. You know, what better time than Game 7 when both fan bases by now just kind of hate each other. But yeah, it's been a battle.
That's right. You see, we're going to have a predisposition to thinking, oh man, this guy's going to be a total Mavs homer. He's going to say how great the Mavs are. He's going to say the L word a lot today. And really, he's a closet Suns fan. And so we're going to hopefully, all of us together, we'll hopefully give you some balanced takes that are going to get you set for Game 7, whatever happens. I am Dave King. You can find me at Dave King NBA on Twitter, and obviously you can find my writing at brightsideofthesun.com. This is our panel today. We got MavsDraft, we got Zona, and we got myself, and we are going to get you caught up. First of all, we haven't podcasted since last Saturday. Last Saturday, a few things have happened since last Saturday. The Suns have played a few games. We thought they might close out the series by this Saturday, and we'd be doing a preview of the Western Conference Finals, but that's not quite the case because the Suns really wanted to have a Game 7 because the way they played Game 6 told us that they really wanted to have a Game 7. That's the only takeaway I can have from that game on how the Suns played, because that was about the worst I've seen them play as far as attention to detail, executing game plans and all that. Zona, what do you think on Game 6? Game 6, the Suns lost by a gob ton after winning Game 5 by a gob ton. And Game 6, they were in Dallas. It looks like the Suns couldn't do anything right. 2 days after, it looked like they did everything right. So what's your take on Game 5 Suns blowout, Game 6 Mavs blowout, Brandon?
It just seems like these two teams really feed off their crowd. It seems like the role players step up when they're home. And, on the road, both teams have been kind of rattled a little bit and not had any answers for the other team. So it's just been a really odd series because after Game 5, I think a lot of Suns fans gained that confidence back after dropping those two games in a row. And then you see Dallas do that to Phoenix. And then all of a sudden, it looks like they have their confidence back. So just kind of been a seesaw battle. I think Dallas has proved me wrong. I had Suns in 5. I thought this was going to be an easy series, but it's been a dogfight. So I think it's a credit to their role players stepping up. Jason Kidd's done a great job game planning against the Suns. So overall, just really impressed with Dallas. But Phoenix has definitely not played to the level we're accustomed to, and a lot of that has to do with how Dallas has kind of attacked them.
Richard, what's your well, first of all, tell us how you went into this series. How did you think it was going to go going into this series? And then what about that has changed in the first 6 games?
Look, I can't please everybody, and so now I'm going to please the Suns fans. Like I pissed them off yesterday, so I'm gonna make the Mavs fans a little bit mad. I had Suns in 5. I thought the Mavs stole one game at home at best because just the team is a lot better with Luka and all that stuff, and I expected Spencer Dinwiddie to be better. I never expected this to go to 7 games, but there's been just some surprising elements to this series, especially in Game 6. You look at how they trapped Devin Booker, for example, and how they forced so many turnovers, and just the extremes of role players play better at home. We have seen the absolute extreme of that statement, and that's been a huge part of the series.
That has been a huge part of the series. It's just crazy. And for those Suns fans who have been in a closet and haven't watched every second of every game and agonized over it and lost sleep over it, but you happen to be on this YouTube channel right now, more power to you. The Suns and Mavericks are tied at 3 games apiece going into Game 7. Each team has won at home, and all 3 of their home games. And the Suns, because they had the better record during the year, have earned the right to have Game 7 at home. Now, that doesn't guarantee that home team wins every time, and we'll talk about that, especially Chris Paul's history with Game 7s. But it does show that the home court is a huge difference maker for this team. Now, the Suns, this isn't the regular season anymore. The Suns were great at home during the regular season, and they were great on the road during the regular season. They had the best road record and home record in the league, at both numbers being 32-9. But winning on the road in the playoffs is different. And I feel a lot of that has to do with the craziness of the fans in the arenas. And for some of these players, it's the first time they've been, not most of the Suns, because they had last year playoffs, but somewhat for the Suns, because last year a lot of the arenas were limited capacity, and especially the Lakers and the Clippers series, the arenas were limited capacity, and this year they're full capacity. So you could say that some of the Suns are experiencing this for the first time, but it's really more the Dallas Mavericks are, for sure. They hadn't gotten past the first round of last year's playoffs, and have not experienced a road crowd like they did. Am I getting it wrong, Richard? Do you think that the crowds have actual impact on how the teams play, even the stars?
Sometimes most times I actually don't think that stuff matters, because I'm like, well, they're NBA players, they've been through everything. Like, this is, at this point, especially for guys who are on their second contract, they know what they've been through. And for teams like the Suns, who just went to the finals, I would think no. But you bring up a good point with Dallas. This is their first time being in the second round since they won the finals in 2011. Like, it's been a really long time. People are hungry. The atmosphere has been incredible. I think
since Luka was 10 years old.
It's ridiculous how long people have waited. And I think the first round stuff, when Utah was here, I don't know, the crowd was good. It wasn't anything special, but here it's just been like, it's been incredibly rowdy. And I think maybe after the pandemic with the bubble, they went from a playoffs, just NBA players went from a playoff or just near play-in pretty much to, with no fans, to this. It may still be an adjustment curve even 2 years later.
Yeah. Zona, what do you think about the crowd's impact on how well the players do?
Yeah, I agree with what Richard just said. I do think this year, like in the playoffs, we've seen how crowds have impacted. The Grizzlies game, like the other night when they pounded Golden State, like it just seems like the players are feeding more off crowds than usual. And I think a lot of that does have to do with the going through COVID and, having the limited seating and, no fans for a stretch during the regular season. So I think it just really just builds players' confidence, and it turns role players into stars, as we've seen throughout the season. So I think crowds are playing a factor more than usual this season.
Yeah, the players obviously deny it, right? Especially if it impacts them in a negative way. The players will be the first ones to deny that the crowd had any impact. However, especially Suns, because I watch all the post gamers and all that stuff, and I'm in the home game ones. The players always also give credit to the fans for hyping them up after a good win when the fans were in. So obviously the players hear it. They just do. And I got to tell you, and look, I'm not trying to give extra credit to Dallas fans or anything like that, because I think they're after last Sunday and putting unwanted hugs on Chris Paul's family, which is effing bullshit. I don't want to give them too much credit, but they were loud as hell. Even during like slow periods of the game, there was still a buzz. And I think that did have a positive impact, at least on the Dallas players, if not a negative impact on some of the Suns players as well. So coming home, I do think the home crowd, all I want to do is let's wrap this up on the crowds, because they only make so much of a difference. But I do think Sunday, it's very important that the Suns are the team playing at home on Sunday. And that's going to be really helpful. Some other things that happened in the game, and again, this is just related to role players playing better at home, all this. The Mavs shot 16 of 39 from three. The Suns shot only 6 of 18 from three. Zona, what's your take on the Suns allowing Dallas to run them? I don't think the Dallas defense was any tighter than the Suns defense on the 3-point line. I think the Suns were just much more willing to run themselves off the line. Do you agree with that, or do you think Dallas was making it much harder for the Suns on threes?
A little bit of both. I think just from a confidence perspective too, like a lot of players that, would normally take threes kind of hesitated or, settled for a drive or just turned the ball over. I mean, they had 22 turnovers. So it was a really ugly offensive showing. And it seemed like there's a stretch where they're going to get it together, and it just kind of never actually clicked. So just overall, just a really rough offensive night. I think Dallas did a good job of playing into that and really forcing, Chris Paul to try to be a scorer by taking the ball out of Booker's hands, and no one else really stepped up. So I think that's my biggest worry heading into this Game 7 is who's going to step up offensively if Chris Paul's not Chris Paul, which he hasn't been the last 3 games, frankly. So, I think credit to Dallas, and also the Suns have some things to figure out for sure.
Yeah, and I think with the 3-point numbers, they took 17, maybe it was 16 non-garbage time threes. So that number goes even further down as you look at the details of the game. And I think it was just kind of, as I talked about, with the extremes of some things like role players playing better at home. And just this is almost a series of extremes where Dallas is like, take as many twos as you would like, because that is easy. Maybe they'll miss some bunnies, and it's been happening. And in this NBA, maybe they're playing to the analytics of threes are really what kills you, unless you're hitting those twos at such a high rate. And Dallas knows that they can trap and play the passing lanes and things like that in the 2-point line. I think that's kind of what did it. I agree with you, Brandon. I don't think the perimeter defense was really strong by Dallas in terms of shot contests and stuff. It was good in terms of forcing turnovers, but the perimeter defense wasn't anything special. I don't think that's why they shot so few threes.
Okay, so now I'm gonna lay a little bit of numbers on you that I don't think I've seen anyone else talk about specifically.
Dang, stat me.
And I got to pump myself up a little bit.
It's back.
Okay. So there's been a lot made of the fact that throughout the entire series, the Mavericks have taken a lot more threes than the Suns in games. The Mavericks are averaging 43s in a game. Suns are averaging 26. That's a huge disparity. So how is it even possible that the Suns have outscored the Mavs in the series overall? Because they have, by about 2 points per game on average. Of course, it's 3 wins, 3 losses, all that. It's kind of throwaway. But how are the Suns making up the difference? Zach Lowe constantly talks about how he doesn't understand how the Suns offense is so good when they do nothing analytically. Like they're the opposite of the Houston Rockets from a few years ago, which Chris Paul was also on, where all the shots need to be either at the rim or behind the 3-point line or free throws, because those are the most efficient. So how is it possible the Suns are one of the top offenses in the league, which is effectively the 3rd best offense this year before they shut down all their starters for 2 weeks? What's interesting here is that even in this series, with the Mavericks shooting 14 more threes per game, the Suns are still scoring better overall because they're making more field goals overall in a game than the Mavericks are, because the Suns are taking shots that they're good at making. Dallas has a couple more free throws per game going in. Dallas has a +4 on 3-pointers made per game going in. But all that's getting offset by the fact that the Suns are scoring better. So all this talk about the Suns offense not being efficient because they're taking 2s instead of 3s, it's just not true if you're good at taking the 2s. Now, if you suck at taking the 2s, then obviously that's going to be a problem. But what happened in the Suns' losses is that they forgot how to make their twos as well. They didn't make the shots that they were taking, that the shots that they had built their offense around, which most defenses give up. Now in the playoffs, it gets harder to get your favorite shots in the playoffs because teams focus on that. If you look at Booker and Chris Paul driving into that free throw line area where they usually get their shots, there's 2 or 3 Dallas defenders ready for them right there with their hands up and stopping the Suns from taking their shots. But also, the Suns aren't setting the right picks. They're not setting the screens in the right directions and all that. So they're not really focusing on getting Chris Paul open. For example, Chris Paul was being guarded well and stopped well for a period of time against the Pelicans. And all of a sudden, when Chris Paul really wanted to get his shots, he got them. So part of it is execution on the Suns side. But I just wanted to point out to you guys that the fact that the Mavericks shoot a lot more threes than the Suns does not mean the Mavericks are a better offense than the Suns. It just means that that's how they're getting their points. And I just want to kind of respond because Zach Lowe is always, especially even just going, I don't understand. Well, if you make more overall field goals than the other team, you're going to win more games. That's the answer. So that's my little takeaway on the threes. So I'm not as worried about the Suns making up much of the difference on the threes, but a difference of 22 attempts, a difference of 10 makes or so, that's a problem. And not making the twos you're supposed to make is potentially a problem. The other thing I wanted to point out is that the Mavericks and the Suns were both this year pretty good on keeping low turnovers per game, except the Suns have suddenly turned into over the course of the entire 6 games so far, have turned into one of the worst in the playoffs at turning the ball over against the Mavericks. And game 6 was only one example with 22. They're averaging 16 a game when they went in the season, averaging less than 13. So overall for the entire series, as MavsDraft, as Richard has said, the Mavericks are getting into passing lanes and they're being aggressive. On the flip side, the Suns have suddenly forgotten how to get steals. They were 6th in the NBA out of 30 teams in getting steals this year. Against the Mavericks, they're the worst of the whole second round in getting steals. The Mavericks are good at not turning the ball over, but the Suns are not getting into the passing lanes and not being opportunistic. We're all going to remember Game 5 second half because that's when the Suns started getting steals all of a sudden. Imagine if that second half didn't happen, the Suns would be even worse in this stat. So the Suns need to hold on to the ball and they need to get it from the Mavericks a little bit more on the defensive end and start getting in their correct angles and their correct passing lanes. So that's kind of what's gone on in the first 6 games. The Suns are turning it over. They're not getting enough steals and open court chances. And when they lose, they're not making the field goals they're taking. Part of it is the Mavericks defense and part of it is the Suns. But while I brought up the 3-point differential, that's not really the decider. So that's my little rant on how the first 6 games have gone. Do you have any more comments, Brandon or Richard, on the first 6 games, or do you want to move into Game 7 predictions?
Yeah, I think just overall Brunson and Luka outplayed Paul and Booker last game, and I think Game 7 at home, like we'll talk about it a little bit later, but this is where you could build a legacy in either a good way or a bad way. So I think we're going to see all the stars on each team step up, and it's just kind of taking care of the ball, the little things like you mentioned, like the turnover difference, 22-6, like that just can't. You're not going to win game, or 22-6. You're not going to win games when that happens. So they just need to clean up the little things and just look more locked in and confident, because they just didn't look confident in Dallas at all, and that shows.
Yeah, and adding on to that with the turnovers, Dallas, I mean, Luka alone only had 1 turnover in Game 6, and I don't know how repeatable something like that is, so that's something to look for. Just because, I mean, look, I love Luka, and I know you said not to say the L word, which took me like 30 seconds to get.
You can. I was just kidding.
No, but he gets a lot of turnovers. Like he makes stupid decisions at times because he knows he's a very good passer and he thinks he can get away with stuff he can't get away with. So I'm interested to see how that works. And then also just kind of the counter with all the length that the Mavs put on Devin Booker and Chris Paul, forcing the negative assist to turnover ratios. Really interested to see how those adjustments are made by both sides.
All right, so before we move on to previewing Game 7, Jay Jimenez keeps asking me this question, and I gave the answer. I gave my own answer on this question, and I want to hear you guys' answer. Looking at the series, and don't look into Jay's favorite team or anything like that, but looking into this series again, and going back to the Pelicans series, which admittedly, Richard, you didn't follow as closely as we did. Would you rather, if you're a Suns team, would you rather face the Pelicans in a Game 7? We'll put it into Game 7 terms. Or would you rather face Dallas in a Game 7? Zona, you go first.
I'd probably, for Game 7, I'd change my answer, I think, just because I think Luka's a much better player than anyone on the Pelicans. And Game 7s, it comes down to, who the best player on the court is sometimes. So for that reason, I'd say I'd rather face the Pels, even though I still think the Pels are a worse matchup for the Suns, just in terms of, the offensive rebounds and, Ingram and McCollum just had an off series. So we got kind of lucky there, but typically he torches the Suns. So, both teams, tough matchups, but I think I'd lean Pels on that one.
Man, I actually think I'd say the Mavs for y'all. I know I didn't get to watch the Pelicans series as closely as I would have liked, but I think, things like Valanciunas versus Aiden, I think actually favor the Pelicans more than something like Kleba versus Aiden does. And I think you're going to see a lot of that in Game 7. So I don't know. The Mavs, I just have low expectations going into tomorrow.
Do you? Yeah, we'll get into our predictions and previewing and adjustments and stuff like that in a sec. But okay, you guys' takes are basically my take. In a whole series, I'd much rather face, my opinion, my whole series, I'd rather face Dallas. Dallas, I don't know how they got to a Game 7 either, but good on them for doing it. I mean, some of that is questionable about how that last weekend went, and some of that was Chris Paul helping them win a couple of games. But really, I'm surprised. Whereas the Pelicans, I also expected an easy series, and it turned out to be one of the worst for the Suns. And I got to tell you guys, I'm so happy that the Grizzlies were knocked out of the playoffs, because my other hot take is I'd much rather face the Warriors in the Western Conference Finals if I'm either Dallas or Memphis, just because, especially for the Suns, the Grizzlies are a supersized Pelicans and super talented version of the Pelicans, whereas the Warriors are a little bit more easier to match up with, I think. But that's a different topic. Suns have to get through a Game 7 first for it to even matter. So
is that even with Morant out, or does that?
Yeah,
change?
Because the Grizzlies were like 20-5 without Morant, and they beat the Warriors they were leading by a playoff record 55 points in the third quarter against this vaunted, now championship talented, apparently, Warriors. Playoff record 55-point lead without John Morant. So I am not excited about playing the Grizzlies in any capacity. And so if I had to pick, but anyway, that's making assumptions. Suns may not be worried about the Western Conference Finals. They got to win Game 7. So let's use that to move into Game 7. So we've seen all these wild adjustments, right? So in Game 2, the Suns embarrassed the Mavs by targeting Luka on defense. And it looked like, oh my God, the Mavs are not going to have any answer for this. It could be a sweep. Then in Game 3, I didn't get to watch it because I was doing family stuff. So my whole takeaway from that was the Suns forgot how to play basketball, and the Mavericks started targeting Chris Paul more often, defensively and offensively. And in Games 3 and 4, they figured out how to neutralize Chris Paul. Suddenly they also made some adjustments defensively to get Luka out of harm's way as much when the screening action happened, to where the Suns were trying to manipulate defenses to get Luka on an island. Richard, what did you see about the adjustments that just going from Games 3 to 4 on what and that has stayed through to now? What adjustments have the Dallas Mavericks made to make it so that Luka is not embarrassed anymore on defense?
Yeah, they started making him play the passing lanes more than they tried taking him as far away off ball. I mean, they're doing their effort to hide him. because I don't think it's any secret. Luka's been terrible on defense for the most part this series, especially when you look at on ball. I think the Mavs knew how to hide him a little bit, and they're making him an interceptor. You saw it a lot in Game 6, but they started that pretty much once they returned home.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think that stayed. The Mavericks have figured out how to at least protect Luka a little bit more defensively, while on the other end, the Mavericks have figured out that it's quite okay for Luka to have Chris Paul on his hip. And it's quite okay for Luka to have most of the Suns defenders that are not named Mikal Bridges on his hip. He just figures out how to overpower and move past these guys. So credit to the Mavericks. What can the Suns do in Game 7 to get that back to their comfort level where they can put Luka back on an island and at the same time protect Chris Paul? Zona, do you have thoughts about how the Suns can reverse this trend?
I think you just got to wear him down, pick him up full court, try to target him defensively, make him as involved in the game as you can on both ends, and just wear him down. Like we saw, I can't remember which game it was. I want to say it was Game 2. Basically, when they're just targeting him the entire second half, and he just ran out of gas, and the Suns pulled away because there's only so much you can do as one player on both ends. And the Suns kind of, it seemed like they try to go out of the way a little bit too much to hunt him, to the point where their offense took a hit. So I think you have to do it in a natural way where you're not forcing it, but at the same time, you have to try your best to make him work. And if that means, like, if say he's guarding Mikal, just send Mikal in a ton of cuts and just throw him around screens and just have Luka chase him around the court, and that's fine. It doesn't have to be on ball like all the time. Just make him work and try to exhaust him. And I think that's your best bet.
Richard, what do you think the Suns should do?
Yeah, I completely echo that. The Jazz tried doing that when Luka returned, when he was still playing a little bit hurt in I think it was Game 5, or maybe it was Game 4. No, it was Game 4 in Utah. And Bojan Bogdanovic he was giving him hell. Like, there's no nice way to put it. Like, he was just full court the entire game. Granted, it wore down Bogdanovic on offense, but the Suns have way more depth and are just significantly better than the Jazz. I think something everybody on the planet, and especially in Arizona, would agree with, that Phoenix can afford to do that. They can put somebody like Mikal Bridges, who has been somewhat low usage on offense. It was a lot in Game 6 of low usage, where you can afford to kind of wear him down and see very little offensive repercussions from it. And Utah didn't have that benefit. So if Phoenix does that, that really gets under Luka's skin. I think that's a big thing they could do to take away Luka's just overall offensive strength.
Yeah, my thing is do it timely, right? Like, don't do it all. I think what happened to the Suns a little bit too much is that they have gone matchup hunting way too often and too early in the game, and they've forgotten how to play their game of basketball, which is not to be so matchup dependent until you get into like crunch time, like fourth quarter or something like that. I would actually stop trying so hard to put Luka on an island the first 2 or 3 quarters, beat him up other ways, right? Like you were saying, Richard, pick him up full court with a big defender and make him work harder on offense than he has been. And then also, just put some screens on him on defense when he's on defense, but don't necessarily try to put him on an island constantly, because that just ruins the entire offense. So maybe wait till the fourth quarter, kind of like the way Game 2 went. They didn't do it until the fourth quarter, and then all of a sudden Luka was gassed, and then he stopped trying. I think the Suns can be smarter, and they just need to be smarter, and they can turn that part of it around. Zona, what other adjustments do you think the Suns need to make in Game 7 to have a better outcome?
I think it comes down to ball movement. Just, when the Suns are moving the ball, they're everyone in the offense eats. They get clicking. The crowd gets into it. They play more confident. So I think it's just getting back to the basics, because, we haven't really had too many of those sequences where it's just like classic Suns where they whip it around the court, 7, 8, 9 times and end up getting a great look. So I want to see that version of the Suns offense back, because I think that just opens up everything else that comes with it. Not, ISO ball, not hunting matchups to where you're just running yourself into the ground. just, move the ball and look like the, those classic Spurs teams that we kind of compared them to in the past.
Richard.
Yeah, and the Suns are the number one pick and roll team in the entire playoffs, just going back even to that first round series. It feels like a lot of those pick and rolls from game 6 just disappeared. And maybe it was that trapping defense that the Mavs played, but I think ultimately the Mavs are pretty exploitable. Something that makes the Mavs defenses good this year, just regular season and playoffs, has been teams don't really try and test them so much. When they start getting beat, they kind of, it's been weird in all the, what is it, like 13, 6, 12 games, whatever it is that the Mavs have played, they haven't been truly tested where they're like, hey, we're going to keep trying our way. Like, sure, you're winning now, but we're going to win the next one. No teams have really been doing that. And it's kind of weird. I'm interested to see if Phoenix does run a ton of pick and rolls, because I think, especially in some of those lineups, when guys like Dwight Powell are out there for all 10 minutes, if they ran pick and rolls every single possession, and like kind of going back with what we said about Hunting, can't do it every time, but with Dwight Powell, I really do think you can. Mm-hmm. If they got Aiden and either Booker or Chris Paul in that as the ball handler, for Aiden, I think you're eating every single time.
Yeah, there's a couple of comments in the chat. Jay, big Mavs fan, I'll out him. Booker gets caught ball watching, and they always hit a 3. Absolutely, that's one thing. Devin has forgotten how to play defense in this series, I think, and he needs to rediscover his ability to play defense. He does get caught ball watching, and Monty Williams has even said all the players, because Luka runs down the entire shot clock dribbling and trying to drive into the paint and getting his shot, or B, Jalen Brunson does the same thing. You end up kind of entranced watching that ball pounding and the moves and all that, trying to get the guy for the guy to get open, and you end up kind of like when you're watching an accident on the freeway, and you end up and your steering wheel kind of starts leading you toward where your eyes are going. That's what's happening to the Suns on defense. They're kind of leaning into the paint, and then Luka does the flip to the corner, and you're leaning the wrong way. So there's no way you can recover defensively. And Booker's getting caught doing that. Aiden's getting caught doing that. Everyone's getting caught doing that. Suns need to be better at staying home on their guy. When it really worked for the Suns was game 5, staying home on their defender, because then Luka had no one to pass it out to, and he really wanted to pass it out. Then in game 6, he decided, you know what, I'm just going to drive and score. That's fine. But they can't win the game with Luka just making 2-point layups every single time. The Mavs are not going to win the game that way. So yes, people need to stop ball watching. And then the other thing is the Suns need to pick up their tempo. Let me throw another stat at you. Just remember the Stat Me Dave thing. I don't want to play it again. But the Suns were 6th in the NBA in shot attempts per game at 90 a game this year. In this series, they're only putting up 82 a game shots. That's because they're allowing the Mavericks to slow them down. Not only is obviously the Mavs are taking a lot of time, because the Mavericks were always one of the slowest teams in the league. They always they were 27th of 30 with 85 shot attempts a game. They're even slower in the playoffs at 81. The Suns need to get some separation on those shot attempts, but they also just need to get both teams up to a higher shot number, because obviously for every offensive possession, you have a defensive possession. So these numbers are going to, but the Mavericks are winning the pace challenge, and that's what's happening right now. The Suns need to up that pace and get more shots on goal earlier in the shot clock, and that is, you get that in transition, but you also get that in not spending 15 of the 24 seconds matchup hunting. Just get into your offense and score quickly. And then if the Mavericks take another 24 seconds to do their own shot, that's fine. But then just go back out there, score. Eventually, it's gonna turn in your favor. Suns got to get a better pace out there. Okay, what's another adjustment that you see the Suns making, Brandon? Do you see any others?
Yeah, so just going to the shot disparity, I think also the turnovers are a factor. Not getting a ton of offensive rebounds are also a factor in that. So those are things that you can fix just with effort, crashing the glass, and then just being smarter. Like there's a ton of Chris Paul like turnovers that were very uncharacteristic, and same with Mikal Bridges. He had one where he literally it looked like he threw the ball to a Mavericks player at the top of the key. So just things that we're not used to seeing that have happened on the road that I think are very correctable. And hopefully, I mean, if they don't bring like a passion and desire to win, like, and not die in a game 7, then they never will. Because in game 6, Dallas did, and the Suns just did not play with a sense of urgency at all, I thought. So really looking forward to see how the energy is for both sides. Game 7's it's do or die time. So it's fun as a basketball fan, but when your team's involved, it's definitely not as fun.
Yeah, Master Fame here in our chat. Thank you so much for the donation. Really appreciate it. We'll spread that money around the group after YouTube takes their 50% cut. Thank you so much. Mavs all season worked with a shorter shot. Yeah, absolutely. I think what you mean is not to take any shots inside the first 16 seconds. I'm not really sure, but that does shorten the game and limits possessions for the opposing team. Absolutely. They've been trying to do that, and they've been winning at that attempt. Let's talk about, gosh, darn it. I lost my, my other thought I was going to make. Anyway, it'll come back to me. So Dallas has been very successful on playing the 5 out, right, with Maxi Kleber, because as you were saying, Richard, they're only playing their starting center like 10 minutes a game, right? Dwight Powell. And they're realizing that it's not working well for them. And then they put in Maxi Kleber and the rest of the game goes well. That pulls the Suns center out. Do you feel like the Suns need to abandon their center, their guaranteed center in every lineup? Or do you think the Suns just need to make some other adjustments? Richard, what do you think?
Yes and no. I think they could play to their strengths a little bit more, or play to the Mavericks' defense weaknesses a little bit more in those lineups. Yes, it is easier to get those 2 points. Like Biyombo, even he's getting looks every single time. Aiden's getting looks. Aiden's missing bunnies though. I think a lot of the story changes with if he was just slightly making a little bit more shots. But ultimately, I think, yeah, they should try a small ball 5 lineup. I think they could really pull it off too with that personnel. I mean, we've seen I don't remember the last time the Suns ran it, but I mean, any Jay Crowder team, they can run him at the 5 or Mikal Bridges at the 4. There's a lot of options with that. I think, look, in a way, yes, you do have to feed those pick and rolls. And like, I think it kind of just depends on the matchup though. When Dwight Powell was in, you absolutely attack those 2s because that's where the absolute weakest part of the Mavs defense is. When that's not the absolute weakest, when you have guys like, Jalen Brunson's going against Mikal Bridges on the perimeter. He can't close out against Mikal. Something like that. Play to that strength a little bit more.
Zona, what do you say?
Yeah, no, definitely. And I think one other point I want to make too is just the rotation for the Suns. It seems like it's just been kind of all over the place. So like the small ball 5 is something that, like, I agree they could use it in stretches, but is that something Monty's going to change? He's been pretty stubborn about certain parts, and then other parts he's had no problem changing, like plugging in Bismack and getting valuable minutes from him. And then, taking Campaign out of the series, leaning on Shamit. So I'm really interested to see what he does with this rotation, because there's a lot of directions he can go. But as we've seen with Monty in the past, he kind of sticks to his guns and doesn't make anything, too crazy as far as rotation adjustments from game to game. But I think we could definitely see some different looks from him, and I'm excited to see what he has up his sleeve.
Well, I tell you what, man, this is a game 7. This is do or die. You lose this game, you're going to lose. You're going home for the summer. Monty has already made some rotation changes. He put Bismack Biyombo in ahead of JaVale McGee because JaVale McGee was getting eaten alive defensively. And he benched Campaign because Campaign was just too – I know what I was going to talk about because we got a question in the chat. Campaign was too small, and Luka was isolating on him and just eating him up as well. And he wasn't strong enough to even stop Jalen Brunson from getting where Jalen wanted to go. So Campaign was a disaster defensively as well as offensively. He wasn't making any shots. There was a question in the chat. It's too far back for me to give you credit. Sorry about that, bud. But asking why hasn't Aaron Holiday played, and why hasn't the media asked why hasn't Aaron Holiday played? Well, first of all, media knows if you're stumping for a 3rd or 4th stringer to play to turn around your season, you're probably stumping for the wrong thing. And B, Aaron Holiday is even smaller than Campaign and Chris Paul. The problem playing the Mavs is that when you put a small guy out there, Luka and Jalen Brunson, as small as he is, he's still a tank, are going to eat that up. They're going to eat that up. You can't hide Aaron Holiday on defense, and he's not big enough to hold up in the post on either of those guys. That's why I think Monty's not even trying. Now, could Aaron Holiday make a difference? Sure, he could, but the numbers, the stats are going to tell you that he's not going to be able to hold up if Cam Payne and Chris Paul can't really hold up in the post either. But that's my take on why Aaron Holiday hasn't seen the floor yet. Brandon, or Richard, do you have any thoughts on whether the Suns should be trying like an Aaron Holiday? And God forbid, please don't make me talk about Elfrid Payton, big warthog. I'm not going to do it. Brandon, do you think the Suns should be trying Aaron Holiday?
I wouldn't mind it in like non-Luka minutes, but like you said, anytime he's on the court, he's going to expose him, and they're going to go right at that matchup. Holiday's a tough defender. He could apply ball pressure, but he can't, guard those guys when they're getting in the paint, backing him down. So maybe for a few minutes, just like as an energy spark towards the end of the first quarter, early second, or something like that. But he's not someone that's, like you said, Dave. He's not going to save your season. He's a third, fourth stringer. So I think it just comes down to the guys in the rotation just having to step up more than, looking outside for help.
Richard.
Yeah, I think I agree. The non-Luka minutes are when Holiday could come in. When the Mavs eventually pull out that Spencer Dinwiddie, Jalen Brunson lineup, I think that is actually a very tailor-made lineup for Aaron Holiday because he can hold his own against either. And those are the two primary ball handlers. The rest of the lineup is either shooters or a roller if Dwight Powell is in. And I think in that case, Aaron Holiday actually almost plays to his strengths on defense. Correct me if I'm wrong.
Yeah, I just worry about him being posted up. That's all. So that's my assumption. I could be wrong and you guys could be right, and very well probably are. I'm not assuming I have any of these answers. I'm not a coach. If Aaron Holiday shows up in the game, give yourselves a star there in the chat, and also you two, and that's totally fine. And if he plays well, I will be thrilled. I am not rooting against him, but please, will you stop talking about who the Suns should have drafted 2 years ago that might be perfect in this situation, especially if you're talking about a guy in Halliburton who is not a defensive player, especially in the post, especially with any kind of strength, but he would be good offensively for sure. Yeah. Desmond Bane. Yeah. Okay, fine. But we can't be reconstructing our roster ahead of Game 7 of Round 2 of the playoffs. We have 6 months of offseason, hopefully only 4 months of offseason to talk about that. And we can do that then, but not right now. Dave, can you talk about the impact Frank Ntilikina has had on CP3 and Book? Look, Frank Ntilikina, one of his strengths is he is 6'5". So he does have the length, and they don't need him on offense because Luka and Jalen Brunson are such the score first ball handlers that you don't need him to be an offensive player. I have been disappointed that the Suns have not figured out a way to make Ntilikina look worse than he has. And I've also been disappointed that the Suns have not made Davis Bertans look worse than he has in this series. But I can't speak to that. I think Frank has done a really good job of just getting into everyone's grill, and it's okay if he collects fouls because they don't need him for long minutes. If you think that same impact could be done by an Aaron Holiday, maybe you're right. I just am not a big I just don't think. Yeah, Frank has a 7'1" wingspan too, Jay. Right. So anyway, that's on that Smalls rotation change. As far as bigs, taking a big out of the lineup and going 5 smalls to defend Dallas, it's also loser's poker if you play to the other team. Your strength is playing Ayton at center. If you're talking about non-Ayton minutes, like when he's got to rest, which he shouldn't rest too much, he should play better defense and stay on the court most of the game. That's my preference. He plays a more spirited perimeter defense and stays out there for 45 minutes. But in the minutes he doesn't play, I would not be opposed to seeing a smaller lineup if the Mavs are not playing Dwight Powell. We'll just see what adjustments Monty makes, because it is Game 7. You don't win that game, you go home. But here's the problem is if you're down 10, you're not going to rely on a third stringer. So it's going to be end of first quarter where you're going to see any of these rotation changes, or you're not going to see them at all, because there's no way those guys are going to bring you back from a big deficit if that's why you're going to play them in the second half. Okay, so we talked about adjustments. What about like, and we talked about scheme changes, we talked about player changes. Any other adjustments you think the Suns should make in a game 7? Richard, do you have anything else we haven't talked about?
No, I think that for the most part covers my thoughts on it personally. The Aaron Holiday something is stuff I've messaged some other Suns people about, asking why it hasn't happened and things like that. And I think we did a good job covering that.
Zona, anything we haven't touched yet?
No, I think we've just about covered it from the Suns' POV. A little campaign wouldn't hurt at this point. I think if they need an energy spark,
He
too.
does hurt.
He does.
Every minute
He's
has hurt.
Look, he's.
I was
it's been rough.
Kirk Henderson of Mavs Moneyball messaged me the other day, and he said, first of all, that was a terribly ref game last Sunday, and was heavily in the Mavs' favor. And B, he also said that Mavs fans love it when they see campaign come on the court, because that's time to kill. So no, I don't want to see any more campaign in this series.
I think they're going to need him, though. I think they will. Maybe not, if they can get by the Mavs, just looking at the Golden State series, they're going to need him. So I don't know. I know it's been rough, but I'm still a campaign believer. I will die on that hill.
Oh, I'm a believer, just not in this series. What about you, Richard? Do you see anything on campaign that you wish, as a Suns fan, you'd want to see?
Look, I feel like guys like campaign are the guys where they can be terrible for 6 games, and then game 7 explode. That's just very much the Mavs. I don't want to say luck, but just that's who the Mavs are. That's their brand, is guys that have been irrelevant come in and just cook. And I worry that something like that is going to happen.
Yeah. So, okay. So let's, as a recap, my opinion, if I had 3 things the Suns need to do on Sunday to win the game: reduce your turnovers, move more on offense, and get better shots in your own offense, and stop matchup hunting so much until the fourth quarter if necessary, and just have better spirit around the team. I think that if the Suns put out maximum effort, they'll have a lot better results. I don't think they put out anything close to maximum effort in game 6. I just don't. It happens in the playoffs, though. The Bucks fans today are pissed because how badly the Bucks played in game 6 at home Friday night, when they could have closed out their series, and they were at home and they still played terribly. Obviously you saw the Warriors barely eke out their win over the Grizzlies without Ja Morant, and it took a flurry at the very end for the Warriors to make some separation. But that was a tough one for them, and they weren't playing their best basketball most of the night. And then, of course, they lost by 50 the game before. So teams don't show up sometimes. That doesn't mean they won't show up the next game. We need the Suns to show up. If you had 2 things you want to see the Suns do over all these other things we talked about, Brandon, what do you want to see them do?
Just play with confidence. I think that's the main thing. The energy, the confidence, really just embrace the crowd. I think getting Booker involved early too, because I think they're going to need one of those vintage Booker games where he takes over and just, gets the crowd hyped. I think we're going to need to see a 35+ point game from him, just matching Luka's bravado and just trying to steal the show in a way. And I know the Suns are at their best when they play team ball, but game 7s are a little bit different. You need someone to have you need stars to be stars, plain and simple. We need Chris Paul to be Chris Paul. But I think Booker's the one that we're going to see step up. He's lived up to every big moment in his career, and at this point, and even in the finals, dropping 40 points in losses, he really, like, with a banged up hamstring, he gave it his all. And I think we're going to see he's going to empty the clip against the Mavs on Sunday, and we'll see how it goes.
I definitely see Booker emptying the clip, and I definitely see Luka emptying the clip. Richard, what are 2 things you think the Suns need to do to win game 7?
Yeah, first, just go with the trend of play to the extreme, how well the role players have been playing at home. Mikal Bridges had a really good start to the series, and this is in terms of offense. And then since really the series moved, I'd say game 4, really ever since then, it's been tough. Obviously, game 5, everybody on the team had a really good game, but in game, I think it was 4 and 6, he really struggled, especially in game 6. He wasn't able to find any groove offensively. getting him going would do wonders. And then on top of that, I think this almost feeds into each other. Chris Paul in the first 2 games had 47 points. So rounding up, he had 24, 6 and 6 on just two and a half turnovers. So I'm not going to round that up to make it look even, just to emphasize, but that number is really strong. And then after that, like, he had 4 turnovers in 2 games. So sorry, 2 turnovers per game. After that, he's been averaging 4.5 turnovers to 6.3 assists. That assist to turnover ratio is horribly uncharacteristically low for Chris Paul. So I think if you see that number rise, that means all the role players are playing better, especially Mikal Bridges is playing better. And I think when Mikal Bridges is on offense, I think the Suns are the hardest team to beat. And that's why I still have them winning the finals. It's because of things like that.
Yeah, absolutely. The Suns need everybody to step up for sure. I want to take a couple of minutes to talk about game 7s. So first of all, the Suns have this team as a team has never played in game 7. Devin Booker and all those guys, every series just won 6 games last year. So, but they are 4-0 in closeout, or 4-1 now in closeout games. So they do with the ability, but they're 0-1 in elimination games. So it's a little bit tough. Okay. Now we're getting some really fun things in the chat. So it's a little bit tough to anticipate how the Suns are going to react in a game 7. Dallas has played in game 7s, but they haven't been successful so far. And while Eric, you're right, the Suns Luka is really good in game 7s. He's never won one. So you don't win a game with just one player. You just don't. Giannis had 40 and 20 on Friday night, and they lost at home in game 6. So let's talk about otherwise game 7s. Chris Paul does have a lot of experience in game 7s. He's in fact been in 8 of them from what I can count, unless my math is really bad. He's been in 8. He has lost 5 of those as a player. And 1, 2, 3 of those game 7s were reffed by Scott Foster. So what are the chances that Scott Foster, who now Chris Paul has a 14-game losing streak to, what are the chances Scott Foster is going to ref Sunday? He was supposed to ref Friday night, the Milwaukee game, but he was reported as being out with non-COVID illness. A lot of fans are thinking, oh yeah, he just called out 6 so that he could be available for Sunday's Suns game to screw over Chris Paul yet again. We don't know what's going to happen. They don't announce refs until the morning of game day. So we'll see. End of Iverson. I'm jumping off a cliff if we get Foster tomorrow. Yeah, we'll see what happens with Scott Foster. But the Suns need to get the refs out of their heads and just worry about winning the game and assume every call is going to go against them. But he's definitely, Chris Paul has a 14-game losing streak to Scott Foster, and including 3 game 7s. So we'll see what happens. Let's move on to true false. Brandon, you've got the true false question, so go ahead and fire away.
Yeah, and I'll hit you with one thing too, real quick. The other player on the Suns that has game 7 experience is Jay Crowder, and he's only played in 2 of them actually. He's 1-1, and his one loss actually came as a member of the Mavericks in 2014 against the Spurs, game 7. So just thought that was an interesting stat. So not a ton of game 7 experience, but CP and Crowder have been there. But yeah, we'll move on to the true or false now. Make sure you drop a comment in the chat with what you think is going to happen. So this one I'll kind of rephrase a little bit. Do you think this series is considered a failure with Dallas pushing the Suns to 7 games? Start with Dave.
Okay. I like the original way you wrote it was, is the season a failure if the Suns lose in game 7? I think it's all a failure if the Suns lose game 7 for sure, because the Suns had higher expectations this year. A year ago, I was happy with whatever they got. This year, I'm not. So no, I definitely think it's a failure if the Suns lose game 7. I think the whole season was, ultimately it was a success story, but I think it's a failure on the bottom line if the Suns lose game 7. Richard, what do you think?
Yeah, I don't think it's a failure to have gotten to the game seven. Like game sevens happen. It's not the worst thing, but yeah, if they lose, I mean, it's hard to sugarcoat that. Like you're playing at a window. You're coming up on the window. You're not there yet, but with Chris Paul's age coming up, like you do have to maximize every day of his age. Like so, I do think getting this extra rest would have been nice into going to face Golden State, but ultimately, obviously, the season would have been a failure. It would be a failure if they lose tomorrow.
Yeah, I agree. I think you lose this series, it's a failure. But I will say, I saw someone on Mavs Twitter tweet out something like, it's a failure that the Suns have even let it go to 7. So that's kind of why I rephrased that question, and that I disagree with. I think if you win Game 7, everyone kind of forgets about it, and everyone's happy again. That's just how it goes. Like the highs and lows of playoffs, it's really hard to win a playoff series. That's something that I think Suns fans are a little bit spoiled with last season in terms of how easy. I don't want to say easy. It was a Clipper series. There were some moments, but their path just there wasn't really a ton of adversity. And this this playoff series we've already seen 2 with the Pelicans and Mavericks. So it's tough to win at this level, and we're seeing that teams aren't going to quit. So we'll move on to
I should answer the rephrased question. It's not a failure that it went 7. Not a failure that it went 7. NBA champions have had 7-game series. It's rare that NBA champions get through the playoffs without having gone 6 or 7 games. It just happens. I mean, the Bucks last year, they only survived the Nets with with a toe, right? Because Kevin Durant's toe was on the line and a potential game-winning shot that only tied the game, and the Bucks eventually won. So I think every team, it's okay for you to have a 7-game series and you don't remember, and it's recorded as a win if you won the series. It doesn't matter if it went 7 or 5. You don't get extra credit. It's not a point system getting to the finals. So I don't think that's a failure. I just think if they lose Game 7, the season has been a failure for sure. Okay, what's your next one?
All right, next one, true or false? Chris Paul is hurt and he's playing through an injury. We'll start with Richard on this one.
Man, I feel like I'm the wrong person to start with, but I'd say false. He's been passive, which I don't know where it's coming from. I don't want to speculate on that, but I'd say false. Just I think everybody overall plays through somewhat of an injury, so like I guess technically true. But I don't know what's making him play more passively over the last few games as a scorer, particularly.
Yeah, I don't think we can speculate. I think looking at his history, it's likely he's dealing with something and will probably get some notification of surgery after the season's over. He's going to play through it. We haven't gotten the injury report quite yet for tomorrow's game, but I'm assuming he's not on it because he's going to play through whatever it is, just like he did last year in the finals. We heard all the pre-finals injuries, but we didn't hear about the finals injuries, and he limped to the operating room after that series was over. So I wouldn't be surprised to hear he was dealing with something, but the thing is Chris Paul has to be smart enough to be a positive, and Monty Williams has to be smart enough to make him a positive regardless. He can't be playing 40 minutes, turning the ball over 7 times. He can't be committing the fouls. I think that's just because the way Dallas is putting him in on defense, and it's Monty's job and the coaching staff's job to protect Chris Paul a little bit by switching less and having him less on Luka on just a simple switch that they're not even trying to fight through. But on committing the turnovers and all that, I mean, he needs to be smarter. Whether he's dealing with an injury or not, he's obviously out there on the floor and he should be able to play fine. So he probably is hurt. Everybody's hurt though, on one level or another. And he just needs to be better. That's it. What do you think, Brandon?
Yeah, I think as you guys mentioned, everyone's dealing with something in the playoffs, and I think there's that, like his hand, there's definitely something still there bothering him, but that's also no excuse for how he's looked. And I think another thing that no one's really talking about is the lack of rest in the series. It's been every other day. They kind of got the short end of the stick because of those other matchups got, I think it was like a 2-day rest gap early in the series. So that's one thing that I think having this extra day for Game 7 could be huge for Paul, just to give him a little bit of a breather. So that's one thing too. I think just fatigue. Like he did just turn 37, so got to kind of remember that, and hopefully this extra day of rest will serve him well.
Absolutely. We can only hope that the extra day of rest is going to make him fresher. He puts $1 million a year into his body and with trainers and nutritionists and all that. They obviously can't stop injuries from happening, but they can certainly help you recover better. So let's hope we get the freshest possible Chris Paul on Sunday. What's your next question?
All right. True or false? Devin Booker will outscore Luka in Game 7. Start with Dave on this one.
I really think Luka's going for 45 in this game. I don't think that necessarily impacts whether the Mavericks win. What impacts whether the Mavericks win is how many points does Brunson get? How many points does I was going to say Tim Hardaway Jr., but I meant Dorian Finney-Smith. Who's between Dorian Finney-Smith and Reggie Bullock, is either one of them going to make 5+ threes? That could be a difference maker. Is Jalen Brunson going to wear down guys and get 27 points in addition to Luka's 45? Those are the questions. But Luka's going to get 45. I don't think that Booker's going to get 45. I think when the Suns play well, Booker scores less in the second half because he doesn't need to as much. So I'm going to anticipate that Booker will score 30+, but he will not outscore Luka. Richard?
Yeah, and Booker outscored Doncic, I think, by only in 2 games, but there's a real chance in a best of 7 that it ends up being in 3 of the 4, which is pretty much a toss-up at that point. And I think Booker ultimately will. I think you're going to see a lot more of the off-ball sets run and better executed for Booker in this game than we saw in Game 6, for example. And I think things like that, plus maybe ISOing a little bit more in the rhythm of the offense, like we've talked about, I think Booker's going to ultimately go for more points. I think you might see, if kind of going back to our last question, if Chris Paul is hurt, maybe he's the facilitator and they just let Booker go full-on scorer mode. So I would say Booker's going to outscore Doncic.
Zona.
Yeah, it's tough. I think it could go either way, especially in this big of a game. But I just have a feeling Booker's going to go off. I think Luka will too, honestly. I could see both them going for 40+. But I think Booker's just going to have one of those, magical closeout games that we've seen him have in the past. I think it was like 46 against the Lakers last year. So I think it's going to be one of those nights for Book, and he's going to feed off the crowd and embrace the moment. So just I'm really high on Booker. Like, I'm going to place a bet too to back it up on DraftKings, our sponsor.
Promo code TBPN for new users. Get free bets.
Yeah, I'm going to go with Booker on this one, but it will be close.
Okay. All right. 2-1 with Booker outscoring Luka. What's your next one?
So this is just a question. Which role player will need to step up the most for Phoenix to win? We'll start with Richard on this one.
Yeah, it's Mikal Bridges. I've said it too many times this series. It's absolutely him. The numbers in wins for him versus numbers in losses is, it's striking, the difference. It's a range. It is a very wide range. And if Mikal is still playing that defense he always plays, which even like in his worst defensive moments of the series, he's still been pretty positive. And yeah, Brandon, he just put it up. Role players are more consistent at home. And I think the first player that feels that benefit is Mikal Bridges. So that's my pick.
That's a really good pick. I'm going to assume for the moment that DeAndre Ayton is not considered a role player in this context. But if he is, he's the guy who has to step up, I think, but not the way people want. The Suns are not going to win or lose by DeAndre Ayton doing vicious slam dunks versus layups. That's not going to decide the game. 2 points is 2 points. What's going to decide the game is, can DeAndre Ayton play defense well enough to not give up open threes from the corner, not give up, obviously Luka can do his step back threes, whatever. He's going to do that against any player. But can he make sure Luka doesn't drive into him and draw the foul? Luka has so many tricks in his bag. Can Ayton hold his own wherever he is on defense better than he has shown in some of these games and as good as he has shown in other games? He's got to be good. but I don't think it matters how many dunks he gets when I say he needs to step up. But if we're talking about non-Ayton, non-Paul, non-Booker, then I definitely think that you've got to go with Mikal Bridges for sure. Cam Johnson, it'd be great if he has a good game, but he won't get enough shot attempts to make a huge difference. You've really got to see Mikal Bridges have a really good game in this one. So what about you, Brandon? What do you think?
Yeah, I think Mikel's a guy I would have picked too, but just, to not be boring and copy that answer, I'll just go with Cam Johnson. I think if he gets hot, we've seen in the past how he could swing games, and I think the bench really needs a boost right now. So if Cam Johnson has a pre-Julius Randle injury, Knicks game, Cam Johnson type game, then I think the Suns' chances of winning are very high. So he's the one I'm looking at, and I think Mikel and Cam, the twins, they just got to step up and play how they do, like we've seen them in the past. The high energy at home and confidence from three, that's the key to this game.
Okay, your last question.
All right, and now question number 5, which role player stepping up for Dallas would be a death sentence for Phoenix? We'll start with Dave on this one.
Man, I tell you what, it seems like there's always one in the 3 Dallas wins. There's been a role player who really, really stepped up, right? You've got Dorian Finney-Smith, who made 8 of 12 threes last Sunday. 8 of 12 threes last Sunday. Then you've got Spencer Dinwiddie, who made 5 of 7 in game 6. I don't even know who to pick. All I'm going to say is if you've got a role player like those guys who make 5+ threes, or 2 of them who add up to 6 or 8 or 10+ threes together on 75% shooting, that's going to really hurt the Suns. The only caveat I'll have to that is that in game 1, they did get almost 23s, and Luka did get 35 points, I think, in game 1. But then game 2, he had 45 points. The Mavs shot well from 3 and from Luka and still lost games 1 and 2 because the Suns played well. So as far as a death knell for the Suns, I think the Suns are their own death knell. If they play like crap, they'll lose. If they play well, they'll win. But role players stepping up, it kills me to watch these guys make 6 threes, 6+ threes when they're not really great 3-point shooters otherwise. And yes, they're making 35, 38% of their threes is pretty good, but it's not great when you're suddenly making 75%. That's my worry. But again, I think just the Suns got to play well to overcome anything. Richard.
Yeah, I've been thinking about this for a while. I don't know, I really don't know who I should select here because they all almost have one commonality, which is whoever hits the most threes, because a lot of this team is potent. You look at Davis Bertans, you look at Maxi Kleber.
Mm-hmm.
Torian Finney-Smith didn't do anything the last game, and they still won big. So part of me wonders, I don't know, if Dorian goes off, something like that. But ultimately, I think it's none of those guys. I think it's a player they traded for Kristaps Porzingis, and I think it's Spencer Dinwiddie. If they have Luka going, if they have Jalen Brunson somehow gets going, I don't count him as the role player in here because he's probably the second best player. And on other teams, he might be a role player, but I'm going Spencer Dinwiddie. We saw him hit a couple threes and get his confidence going early in the game in game 6. And for the most part, since he dunked on Rudy Gobert in the last series, including the rest of the series in Utah, he hasn't been very good. If he can get going, both finishing at the rim, he's smoked a lot of layups. If he could finish at the rim and then also be able to hit some threes and just off the dribble jump shots as a whole, I think Phoenix might be in trouble, but I don't know the likelihood of that happening. I think that's the Mavs' top priority is getting all 3 guards going. I think they're one of the toughest teams to beat when that happens.
Yeah. All right, I'm going to throw out, I think, Brandon Katz here really quick. Sorry, Zona. Brandon Katz put out Shaman has played well in a limited role. My sneaky role player, if he makes 3 threes, this game is the Suns for sure, just because the context in which he shoots them. So that's an interesting backdoor kind of thing. Okay, Brandon.
Yeah, no, Shaman's look good. And he's aggressive, playing with confidence, attacking the rim, which, it still catches me by surprise, like when he tries to put people on posters. But yeah, I think my pick for the Mavs, I agree with Richard that Dinwiddie's a guy that, they haven't really got a lot out of this series. So if you do get something out of him, he gets hot and he could really swing a game in their favor. So he's a guy that I'm most nervous about, just because we've already seen, Maxi Kleba and Reggie Bullock and Dorian Finney-Smith all get hot from three, and we are where we are. But if Dinwiddie gets hot, then that I think really changes the whole dynamic of how Luka and Brunson are going offensively too, and just adding another option to worry about on the perimeter could be a pain for the Suns. But yeah, I think I also agree with what Dave said, that a lot of it is their own doing sometimes with how they're closing out on threes and defending those role players. So it's kind of pick your poison. The Mavs have a lot of role players that are streaky and can get hot at any moment. So that's kind of the scary part of them in this series.
Yeah, a commenter in the chat is Shaman on Luka is a laugher. Yeah, look, the reason I said Shaman would be a sneaky if he made 3 threes, the Suns are winning, is because he'll only get the opportunity to take enough threes to make them if the Suns are in the lead, because Monty's not going to trust Shamet if he's getting eaten up on defense and missing his shots early. You're going to see 45 minutes of Devin Booker. You're going to see probably too many minutes of Chris Paul. You're going to see 45 minutes of DeAndre Ayton. This is like the finals for them. This is win or go home. So you're going to see the Suns' best player. Mikal Bridges may not sit at all. He'll probably play all 48 minutes. They laughed about him playing 47 and a half minutes the other day. And Monty was like, he's probably pissed that I took him out for half a minute. So I would expect Mikal Bridges won't sit down all game. And I think that role players are going to have a tough time stepping up simply because the starters are going to be getting all the time. And on Dallas's side, you've got Bullock and DFS and Kleba. Bullock and DFS, 45 minutes apiece at least. Luka, 45 minutes apiece. You're going to have a hard time seeing weird role players getting tons of shots just because of the way this game is going to go. But I do think that Bridges is the key. If he has a good offensive game, as Richard says, the Suns have this thing. If he doesn't, if he disappears, then it's going to be a toss-up. Okay, so predictions. That's it. Let's wrap this thing up and make some predictions. And let's get down even to the difference in the final score, because guessing final scores is fun. But you can do either way. You can tell me what you think the final score will be, or you can just tell me how much one team or the other wins by. Richard, go for it.
Oh, man, putting me first. This hurts. I'm going to say 115-108 Suns.
115-108 Suns. Okay, so by 7. All right, Brandon?
That's a good pick. That's about the range I have it at. I think I'll go 117-106 Suns win.
All right, we got some guesses in the chat. Eric Linares says Suns win by 8. We've got Pork Chop Express, Suns win by 115-98 score. We've got another person, Big Warthog, guessing a 29-point Suns win, which is just in line with the rest of the series. So I don't think that's too out of bounds. The home team has been winning by a lot. You've got Ted Lubin, I keep calling him, even though it's written backwards. Suns win 116-102. Suns by 6, Sawbucks. Suns by 7, Albert. And man, these guys are incessant. Let's see. Master Fame, Mavs. Of course, you've got some Dallas fans in our chat. Love to see the Dallas fans in the chat. Paul George fan, Suns 128, Mavs 86. I don't know that this is going to be a blowout. I think this is going to be the closest game of the series. That's my guess. My guess is that this is the closest game in the series. And but I do think the Suns are going to win this thing. My prediction is going to be Suns by 10, but it's going to be within 5 in clutch time. The first game of the series that'll have clutch time in it. So Big Warthog, Naked HD wins by 69. Yep. Okay. Okay. So then who do you think, well, first, now we know the winner of this game is going to play the Warriors starting on Wednesday. I'd like to hear what you guys think of the other side on the East. Who wins Game 7 on Sunday of Bucks Celtics? Richard, who's gonna make the conference finals in the East?
I had a Bucks Suns rematch, so I want to stick to my guns. But at the same time, if Robert Williams comes back, I don't know. The Celtics are tough, man. I don't know how they forced this to 7 without Robert Williams. Like, they're a very good team, and obviously he's not like the heart and soul, but he is a really important player to them. And if he's back, I don't know. This one's a really, really tough one for me. But for the sake of consistency, I'll go with the Bucks. I'm not doubting Giannis in a Game 7.
All right, Brandon, what do you think?
Yeah, that's where I'm torn, is the whole Giannis thing. Like, I don't want to bet against him in a Game 7, but the Celtics, I think, are deeper with Middleton out and just have a little more firepower, and they're going to be at home. So I think I'm going to have to go with Celtics. But at the same time, like, if Giannis just goes nuts and gets, goes for 50, and, Drew Holiday does what we've seen him do, then I could see a world where, the Bucks go out and beat Boston for the third time in TD Garden in one series. But I'm going to go Celtics in a close one.
All right, Albert picks Boston. Michael Lockhart picks the Bucks. Ted Lubin, Bucks miss Middleton. Celtics win. Middleton has been their late game shot maker for the last several years. Drew has stepped up at least in that Game 5 for sure, making big shots at the end. And of course, Drew Holiday had the big steals, the 2 big steals at the end that gave Suns fans nightmares because they reminded them of Game 6 against the Suns.
Too soon.
When Drew had that. Too soon. Yeah, sorry. It's always going to be too soon. 10 years from now is going to be too soon. I'm going to guess the Bucks, just because what we've seen from the Bucks closing out games, if it's close, for sure. The Celtics could win in a blowout, but I think it's more likely going to be Bucks over that. Now you've got Heat have made the conference finals, and let's assume your pick wins Game 7 tomorrow. Who comes out of the East? Richard, who makes the finals out of the East?
I think it's Milwaukee.
I think Miami has not played a healthy team yet. So if people are ripping on the Suns last year for not having to play a healthy team to get to the finals, you've got Miami on the other side. So we'll see what happens in the conference finals for them. What do you think, Brandon?
I think if Milwaukee advances, I think they'll get by the Heat. But since I picked Celtics, I think the Heat would beat the Celtics. So I'm going to go with the Heat. That was my prediction beginning of the season. I had it bookmarked. I had Suns versus Heat in the finals. So hoping that I can bring that up and retweet it once it's actually a reality. But yeah, I'm going Suns Heat finals, sticking to my guns there.
So it's still alive. So that's good. I got to pick the Bucks coming out. I think they just know how to win those games, the games that they need to win. Miami is a great looking young team, but they can look bad and they're not all young either, but they can look bad and they can look good depending on the game. And so they're fairly inconsistent, although they did get the number 1 seed in the East. I just don't see Miami coming out of it against the Bucks team. If it's against the Celtics, it's much more of a toss up, but I already picked the Bucks to make it to that round. So I'm going to say the Bucks make it to the finals again. Albert, Golden State Warriors hasn't played a healthy team either. That's correct. They haven't. So we'll see what happens in the Western Conference Finals, because both the Mavs and the Suns are as healthy as they're going to get for this next round. Okay, so that is our predictions. Do you have any other final comments, Zona? And then also tell us where we can find you around the web.
Booker scoring 47 on Sunday, and the Suns are winning. Sorry, Richard. Just got to get that out there. But, yeah, you could find me at Zona Hoops _ on Twitter. Appreciate MavsDraft, a.k.a. Suns Draft, coming on. Even though he had that take earlier, he's redeemed himself with the shirt. So that's right. We're all good over here.
Richard, what's your final comments and where can we find you?
Hey, I didn't know that just simply wearing a Phoenix shirt would do it. I will buy like tons of team shirts now if I can just say stupid stuff all day. No, I appreciate y'all having me. I'll just first of all, Booker one-upping Tatum from yesterday, getting one more than Tatum got would be pretty impressive. But I also have the Suns. I mean, I want the Mavs to win really badly. Like, I'm not going to lie. It'd be really cool to go from first round exit year over year. And I'm still salty about 2014 when they should have beat the Spurs, but the Spurs won in 7 and won the title, which going back to an earlier question, going to 7 doesn't hurt. But I don't have the confidence in the Mavs. I think the Suns also win. I think Booker's gonna have a big game, and I honestly kind of see the trend going a little bit the same way the whole series has gone in terms of no clutch games, and we'll see. But ultimately, before I plug myself, yeah, I apologize for that tweet the other night. I definitely was riding the emotional high, and I was like, yeah, nobody will see it. It's fine to air it out, and then I just went to bed. And in hindsight, if I really
Tell
wanted
us
to
again
let
what
that
the
thought
tweet
out,
was, Richard, for those who don't follow you.
it was a stupid tweet. And in hindsight, I also realized my take was wrong beyond being dumb. But I said Booker was atrocious on defense, and he's been the biggest flopper in the series. And yeah, it was definitely the emotional.
That was just an emotional reaction. Like
Yeah,
all of us
course.
haven't done a tweet like that.
Yeah, and like I don't think it's the worst thing I've done. Like, look, if I regret what I said, it's not like I said anything like, harmful to society or anything, but like I I definitely have had better takes and better tweets in my life. But for a lot of people who have been roasting me saying like, you don't know the Suns, anything like that, I'm still the only person in Dallas that defends the Aiden pick. That's why I'm still wearing a DeAndre Aiden shirt. So like years of work have gone completely just eroded.
Yeah. No, Richard's been a huge Sun supporter for years, so one tweet doesn't change that. Like, so people just get too emotional on. I think it was just more of a shock since you're rebranded as Suns Draft that you tweeted that. So it wasn't even that bad of a tweet. I just thought it was funny.
Yeah, I appreciate it. And I would never I don't plan on cooking Suns fans or whatever if the Mavs win. I muted all my notifications over the last few months. So I don't see most stuff to actually do that. I don't do the petty wars that much unless you're absolutely attacking me personally. So I won't do that. But ultimately, if you want to roast me still, go ahead at MavsDraft on Twitter. I do NBA draft work. That's honestly what I feel like I do more of than NBA at this point. I just went out to an NBA draft workout yesterday. Really fun stuff. So got insight on a lot of that. So go ahead and if you think if it was a one-time mistake, if I can prove you right, give me a follow on there.
All right, definitely give him a follow. He's great on draft takes. Okay, so my hot take is that the Footprint Center is going to be louder than it's been since the opening game of the Lakers series last year, and I just have a personal memory of how crazy loud that was because there was some apprehension, there was some worry that the Suns might not be able to beat the Lakers even in the first round because it was the Suns' first appearance in the playoffs. The Lakers had just won the championship the year before. All that. The Suns fans are going to come in wanting to blow the roof off the stadium tomorrow in Footprint Center, and I want to hear it. I'll be there. I want to hear you guys help propel the Suns to a big Game 7 win. That's my hot take, is that the fans are going to be so loud we're not even going to be able to hear whistles, even during boring parts of the game. You got to keep up the noise. The Suns really do live off that. Mikal Bridges, DeAndre Ayton, those young guys who are still willing to admit the fans have an impact on the game. Even Devin Booker has admitted that the louder the fans are, the more excited the fans are, the more hype they get. And so you need to do that. That helps role players step up. So like I said, I predict the Suns are going to win tomorrow. I don't know who's going to have the biggest scoring game. It doesn't really matter. What matters is who wins, and I think the Suns win. You can find me around the web. My name is Dave King. I'm at Dave King NBA on the twits. I am on brightsideofthesun.com as the editor there and a frequent writer, and I'll be doing the preview for tomorrow's game. And you can find me all over. And of course, this podcast, if the Suns are lucky enough, good enough to make it to the next round, I'm going to corral Zona for a midweek, and we're going to preview the next round of the playoffs. But until then, I hope you guys enjoy Game 7. I hope you get some sleep tonight, being all worried about it. I hope the Suns get some sleep tonight, and we have a great game tomorrow. Thank you all for joining in the chat today. Thank you, Mavs fans, for joining us in the chat as well. You guys have been almost entirely respectful, and you may have gotten some free nude pics because of all these weird bot accounts getting in here. So it was a big win overall, apparently. Y'all have a great day.